Howdy, hello, and welcome to our podcast episode number 50. One wrong call turns a cheater's life upside down. I'm Thomas, and I am here with my friend Timothy. Today, we are going to discuss a film called Phone Booth. Phone Booth is a 2002 American psychological thriller film about Stuart Shepard, a dishonest publicist who becomes trapped in a phone booth by an anonymous sniper. The sniper threatens to kill him if he leaves and forces him to confess his secrets to his wife and mistress. As the situation unfolds, Stuart must navigate through lies, deceit, and danger while trying to survive the ordeal. To start with, I didn't enjoy the film. But Tim, so, did you like Phone Booth?
Well, Tom, I have to say that it wasn't exactly my cup of tea either. Personally, I prefer films with a bit more depth and complexity, something that really makes me think. This one, on the other hand, seemed like just another run-of-the-mill thriller. But then again, maybe it's because I'm not really into these kinds of movies where everything revolves around such a simple premise. A man trapped in a phone booth by a sniper. It feels a bit too contrived for my taste. Don't get me wrong, the acting was decent enough, and there were some tense moments here and there, but overall, I just didn't find it very engaging or memorable.
Well, Tim, while I can understand where you're coming from, I actually quite enjoyed Phone Booth. It had me on the edge of my seat throughout most of its runtime. The pacing was really well done. It kept things moving along without feeling rushed or disjointed. And speaking of which, the performances were really good across the board. Colin Farrell did an excellent job portraying Stuart Shepard. You could feel his desperation and fear as he tried to navigate this impossible situation. And Forrest Whitaker was fantastic as Captain Ed Ramey. His calm yet stern demeanor added an extra layer of tension to the film. So while it may not be as deep or complex as some other films out there, I think Phone Booth succeeds as a tightly paced thriller that keeps you engaged from start to finish.
Well, Tom, I can see where you're coming from, but personally I still think the film had its flaws. For starters, the premise itself feels a bit far-fetched, even for a thriller. A sniper targeting someone just because they answered a phone call in a public phone booth. It's hard to imagine that kind of situation happening in real life. And while I agree that some of the performances were decent, particularly Colin Farrell and Forrest Whitaker, I felt like there could have been more character development for the other characters. They all seemed a bit one-dimensional, especially when compared to Stuart's arc.
Ah, Tim, you know what they say about believability in thrillers, right? Sometimes it's not about being realistic, but rather about creating tension and suspense. And let me tell you, Phone Booth did a pretty good job at that. As for character development, I think the filmmakers chose to focus more on Stuart's journey rather than spreading it thin across multiple characters. Plus, keeping things simple made it easier for viewers to connect with Stuart and his predicament. Now, let me ask you this. What did you think about the twist at the end when we find out that the pizza delivery guy was actually part of the sniper's plan all along? That was a pretty clever reveal, if I do say so myself.
Well, Tom, while I appreciate the attempt at creating tension and suspense in Phone Booth, I still think they could have done more with some of the other characters. As for the twist with the pizza delivery guy, it was definitely surprising, but I'm not sure if it was entirely necessary. It felt a bit forced and contrived to me. Maybe if there had been more subtle hints throughout the film leading up to that reveal, then it would have packed more of a punch. But as it stands, it just kind of came out of nowhere and didn't really add anything significant to the story, in my opinion.
Well, Tim, you know what they say about opinions, right? Different strokes for different folks. I thought the reveal with the pizza delivery guy added an extra layer of intrigue to the film and made Stuart's situation even more desperate. It showed that the sniper was always one step ahead and that there was no escape from his wrath. Plus, it provided some closure regarding the mysterious phone calls at the beginning of the film. Now, moving on, let's talk about the themes explored in Phone Booth. Morality, deceit, and consequences of one's actions. What did you think about how these themes were handled throughout the movie? Did they resonate with you?
Well, Tom, I thought the themes were certainly present, but again, I felt like they could have been explored in a deeper manner. The film seemed more focused on creating suspense and tension rather than delving into the psychological aspects of the character's actions. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed watching Stuart's descent into desperation as he tried to survive, but I wanted more from it than just that. It felt like there was an opportunity missed to really dig into some complex moral dilemmas and make us question our own beliefs about honesty and integrity in situations where the stakes are high.
Well, Tim, while I can understand your point of view, I personally didn't feel that Phone Booth needed to delve too deeply into the psychological aspects of the character's actions. It was more of a thriller after all, and sometimes simplicity works best in creating tension and suspense. Besides, if we were to explore every single moral dilemma and complex situation presented in a film, we'd be here all day discussing it. Now, let me ask you this. What did you think about the ending of Phone Booth? I personally enjoyed how it left things open, ended with Stuart seemingly changing his ways but still facing certain consequences for his actions. It made for an interesting discussion point after watching the film, don't you think?
Well, Tom, while I appreciate your perspective on the matter, I still feel that there could have been more substance to Phone Booth. The ending was certainly open-ended, which is always nice, but overall it left me feeling a bit underwhelmed. However, I do agree that it made for an interesting discussion point after watching the film. So maybe in that aspect, Phone Booth did succeed in sparking some debate and conversation about morality and consequences of actions among viewers like ourselves.
Well, Tim, while we might have differing opinions on the film itself, I think we can both agree that Phone Booth was a pretty intense and suspenseful thriller. Now let's talk about some behind-the-scenes tidbits that made this movie even more fascinating to watch. Did you know that director Joel Schumacher initially wanted to film the entire movie in real time? That meant audiences would have experienced every tense moment alongside Stuart Shepard, with no breaks for commercials or bathroom trips. Can you imagine how exhausting that would have been both for viewers and the crew alike?
Well, Tom, I must admit that's an interesting tidbit about Phone Booth. It certainly would have added another layer of intensity to the film, but I'm not sure if it would have been feasible given the technical constraints at the time. But it just goes to show how dedicated Schumacher was in creating a truly immersive experience for viewers. Now, let me share something interesting about the casting process. Colin Farrell reportedly spent hours each day practicing his American accent before filming began. It's quite impressive, really, how convincing he sounds as an American in this movie, considering he's actually Irish. And speaking of accents, did you notice any slip-ups from Forrest Whitaker during his performance as Captain Ed Ramey?
Well, Tim, while I didn't notice any major slip-ups from Forrest Whitaker regarding his accent in Phone Booth, it is interesting to learn about Colin Farrell's dedication to perfecting his American accent for the role. As for the decision to not film the entire movie in real time, I'm glad they ultimately decided against it because it would have been quite exhausting both for audiences and the crew. Now let me ask you this. Did you know that during production there were actually plans to shoot a sequel to Phone Booth? It was supposed to be set in London with a different protagonist, but unfortunately those plans never materialized due to various reasons, including creative differences among the filmmakers.
Tom, I must admit I didn't know about the planned sequel for Phone Booth, but it's interesting to learn that there were discussions about setting it in London. It would have been quite different from the original film, given the location change and potential new characters. However, as you mentioned, it's unfortunate that those plans never came to fruition due to creative differences among the filmmakers. But hey, maybe one day we'll get a proper phone booth sequel or even a reboot with a fresh take on the premise. Who knows?
Well, Tim, while we might have differed on some aspects of Phone Booth, I think it's safe to say that both you and I can appreciate the film's technical achievement. The special effects team did a fantastic job creating an intense and claustrophobic atmosphere throughout the movie, particularly in scenes where Stewart is trapped inside the phone booth with no escape from the sniper's gaze. The way they were able to seamlessly integrate the sniper's point of view shots into the film was quite impressive and added an extra layer of tension to each scene. Additionally, the use of practical effects like the bullet holes in the phone booth and the pizza delivery guy's body was very well executed. It just goes to show that sometimes old-school practical effects can still pack a powerful punch when done right. Now, let's talk about the filming locations for Phone Booth. Did you know that most of the movie was actually shot on location in New York City? The iconic Times Square and surrounding areas provided the perfect backdrop for this high-stakes thriller, adding an extra layer of authenticity to the story.
Tom, I must agree with you that the special effects team did a fantastic job in creating an intense atmosphere throughout Phone Booth. The sniper's point of view shots were indeed very well integrated into the film and added another level of suspense to each scene. And yes, the practical effects, such as the bullet holes and the pizza delivery guy's body, were also quite impressive. It just goes to show that sometimes old school techniques can still deliver great results, even in modern movies like Phone Booth. Now, back to the filming locations. I had no idea that most of the movie was actually shot on location in New York City, but it does make sense considering how iconic Times Square is as a setting for high-stakes thrillers. It definitely added an extra layer of authenticity to the story, which I appreciate as a film enthusiast.
Well, Tom, it's always interesting to learn about the behind-the-scenes aspects of films we enjoy watching, isn't it? And speaking of filming locations, did you know that there was originally another plan for the climax of Phone Booth? According to some sources, director Joel Schumacher initially wanted to shoot the final showdown between Stewart and the sniper atop a skyscraper in New York City. However, due to various logistical reasons such as budget constraints and safety concerns, they had to abandon that idea and settle for the rooftop scene we see in the final cut of the movie.
Well, Tom, I must admit I didn't know about this alternate plan for Phone Booth's climax, but it does make for an interesting discussion point. It would have been quite spectacular to see Stewart and the sniper engaged in a high-stakes confrontation atop a skyscraper overlooking New York City, but I can understand why they decided against it, given the logistical challenges involved. As for the rooftop scene we got in the final cut of the movie, I think it was well executed and provided an intense conclusion to the film without being too over the top or unrealistic.
Well, Tim, speaking of the cast of Phone Booth, I must say that Colin Farrell's performance as Stuart Shepard was quite impressive. He managed to convey both the character's desperation and vulnerability while also maintaining an air of arrogance, which added depth to his portrayal. Forrest Whitaker was equally convincing as Captain Ed Ramey, bringing a sense of authority and determination to his role. And let's not forget about Kiefer Sutherland, who played the enigmatic sniper. He managed to create an unnerving presence with very little screen time, which is quite a feat in itself.
Well, Tom, I couldn't agree more about the performances in Phone Booth. Colin Farrell did an excellent job portraying Stuart Shepard, showcasing both his flaws and vulnerability while maintaining that air of arrogance which made him so intriguing to watch. And Forrest Whitaker was fantastic as Captain Ed Ramey. He brought a sense of gravity and authority to the role that really grounded the film. As for Kiefer Sutherland, I thought his performance as the sniper was truly chilling. His ability to convey menace with just a few words and well-placed gestures was incredibly effective.
Well, Tim, it's interesting how you mentioned that Colin Farrell managed to maintain an air of arrogance while also showing his vulnerable side in Phone Booth. This reminds me of another film he starred in called In, where he played a very similar character, a morally ambiguous hitman trying to find redemption. I think it just goes to show how versatile an actor Farrell is and how effectively he can portray complex characters with shades of gray.
Well, Tom, I must say that's an excellent point about Colin Farrell's performance in Phone Booth compared to his role in Bruges. It does showcase his versatility as an actor and his ability to bring depth to morally ambiguous characters. And speaking of versatile actors, what do you think about Katie Holmes' role as Pamela McFadden? Do you think she did enough justice to her character given the limited screen time she had in Phone Booth?
Well, Tim, while I agree that Katie Holmes didn't have a substantial amount of screen time in Phone Booth, I still think she managed to make an impact with her performance. Her character was portrayed as being both vulnerable and strong-willed, which were effectively communicated through her actions and dialogue with Colin Farrell's Stuart Shepard. In the limited time they shared together on screen, their chemistry seemed quite genuine, which added credibility to their relationship dynamic. Overall, I think Katie Holmes did a decent job in Phone Booth, given the constraints of her role.
Tom, I must say that's an interesting point about Katie Holmes' role in Phone Booth. And speaking of influences, it's fascinating to see how this film has inspired other movies and TV shows over the years. One such example is the popular Spanish thriller series Money Heist, which features a similar premise. A group of criminals trapping their target in a confined space while demanding something from them under threat of death. In fact, one scene from Phone Booth where Stuart Shepard is surrounded by SWAT teams has been directly referenced in an episode of Money Heist. It just goes to show how effective this film's concept was and continues to be even after 2 decades.
Well, Tim, that's a great example of Phone Booth's lasting impact on the entertainment industry. And speaking of influences, I couldn't help but think about another film which borrows heavily from Phone Booth's premise, Closed Circuit. Released in 2013, this British legal thriller also features a high-stakes trial and a mysterious sniper who seems to be watching the protagonist's every move. The similarities between these two films are quite striking, from the use of closed-circuit television cameras to the climactic scenes taking place in crowded public places. It's interesting how Phone Booth managed to inspire such a diverse range of projects over the years.
Well, Tom, I must say that's an excellent point about Closed Circuit. And speaking of influences, it just goes to show how effective Phone Booth's premise was in capturing people's imagination and inspiring future works. In fact, some may argue that the popularity of this film led to a resurgence of the hostage thriller subgenre in the early 2000s with movies like Cellular, Phone Booth, and even television shows like 24 following in its wake. It's quite fascinating how one film can have such a lasting impact on an entire industry.
Well, Tim, it really is fascinating to see the ripple effects that Phone Booth had on the entertainment industry. And speaking of influences, I couldn't help but think about another iconic thriller which borrows heavily from Phone Booth's concept, The Call. Released in 2013, This horror thriller stars Halle Berry as a 911 operator who becomes the target of a serial killer after she makes a life-changing decision at work. The premise is quite similar to Phone Booth. An ordinary person finds themselves trapped in a confined space with no escape, facing imminent danger from an unknown assailant. It's interesting how Phone Booth managed to inspire such a wide range of projects across different genres.
Tom, it's quite clear that Phone Booth left a lasting impact on the entertainment industry. From its unique premise to its intriguing characters, this film has inspired countless works across different genres. And even after 2 decades since its release, it still manages to captivate audiences with its tense and intense storytelling. So what do you think, Tom? Do you have any final thoughts on Phone Booth before we wrap up this discussion?
Well, Tom, I must say that even though there were certain aspects of the film that I found a bit predictable or cliched, I still believe that Phone Booth is a solid thriller with an engaging storyline and some standout performances from its cast. It's definitely a film worth watching for fans of the genre. As for my final thoughts on Phone Booth, I would say that it serves as a testament to the power of good storytelling and how even seemingly simple concepts can be executed in such an effective manner when done right.
Said Tom. And with that, let's wrap up this discussion about Phone Booth. Thank you all for joining us tonight on Tim and AM, Tom's Film Nights. We hope you enjoyed our lively debate about this iconic thriller. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Until next time, good night, everyone.